Welcome back to our weekend review, and with budget in mind, amongst so many things, inflationary issues which we talked about in our first part. Mr. Callister, I guess we start with you, because the MUA, or MU as they like to be called these days, certainly you were flagging inflationary issues there, quite rightly, on electricity, but do you want to elaborate or tell us more about how bad this news is going to be when the increase goes through?
The honest answer is we don't know how bad the news is going to be, because the actual starting point to the end point of where we could set this tariff is massive. So the question is, we go back to March 2021 when we started to get that energy from that fuel crisis, the price of the wholesale price of gas. Then suddenly the price starts to increase per therm, and it's gone up from an average price of which is what we used to be able to secure of 50 pence a unit, all the way up to over £4 a unit. And you've got to remember that the MUA purchase around 40 million therms a year. Very fortunately that we're in 2021, we had secured forward and hedging contracts to secure 70% of our supply, but the remaining 30% came at almost the same cost as the 70%. It increased the value that we had to pay to around £16 million in 2021, still going into 2022. So that equates, that's from an organisation point of view, we have absorbed all of those costs, which is around £16 million. So every single household on the island, every single business on the island has had a saving of around £180 over this period. However, as we go into 2022, the prices per therm has not dropped sufficiently enough. Okay. So we're still struggling with the financial problem.
But if you can answer the question, if you can, which is what do you expect to happen to electricity prices? Because, I mean, speaking again from the private sector perspective, businesses are now setting their tariffs for the season. What you need to give the businesses some indication.
Well, okay, as I said, the Tynwald strategy was very clear. CPI in September is the figure to use. We know that was 5%. That is definitely the starting point. I've never had stress like I've had as the chairman of the MUA. I've gone in at one of the most difficult points for the business, and I have to put on record my sincere thanks and understanding to a very dedicated workforce within Manx Utilities, not just the executive board, but also the executive team that works every day that are trying to resolve this. What we've been trying to do is to minimise the impact of an increase in 2022. We've brought the Council of Ministers in to help us to try and set that tariff. We don't know what that tariff is going to be just yet, Chris. We know the starting point is 5%. It could be as high into the 30s and 40%, but we are desperately looking at a suite of options that may include having to borrow money, that may need to take some back out of the bonds. We may, as I say, as well as increasing. We're not talking about profit here. We are talking about making sure that the organisation gets through this energy crisis and comes out the other end, but also meeting all of its obligations, paying those bonds back in 2030, paying the bonds back in 2034 as well as delivering all the other things we need to deliver on behalf of this island.
Well, hang on a second.
Hang on, 30 or 40%? It could be 50%.
No.
Yeah, well, hang on a second. But there's something in, apart from the potential for a 30, 40% increase, the thing that really disturbs me is the idea that there's a feeling, a belief perhaps, and I'll just check I might have got Rob wrong here, that somehow we expect gas prices to return to some form of normality. Rob, that will not happen to the degree that you want it, because effectively at the moment, gas consumption across the world is going up because it's a transition fuel. It's not something that's just blown up and will disappear. So we're going to have to live with higher prices across the board. You'd accept that in principle?
Okay, the price we were buying per therm, which was very stable, was around 50 pence a unit. Obviously, we know the price went up to beyond 400 pence a unit. It has started to come back down, and I think you can forward purchase around £2. It's still incredibly high, four times as much. So we've got to look at that. Just to put it into context, electricity prices over the last 5 years have increased by less than 8%. So we've done really well. I'm certainly absolutely fighting, and this is an honest interview, I'm fighting hard to get that price down. We've had various meetings with Treasury, and I'm incredibly grateful for Treasury. And Andrew was at those meetings. He will see how passionate I've been to try and sort this out. Now, I just want to be clear. We're not saying here that the price is going to increase by 30% or even 39%, 40%. We are desperately trying to get this into the teens if we can. But it really is to bring the Council of Ministers in and to ask for their input. But as I say, I think we may be looking at borrowing some, we may be taking some back out of the bonds and then setting the tariff to get through 22. But as Chris said, what we need is the price to come back down so we can lock the prices away in 23 and get back to some stability.
Well, I think you might be howling to the moon in terms of expecting low gas prices again. I think that's over. But if you step back from the household perspective, everybody now knows inflation's running, food's getting more expensive, energy's getting more expensive. Apparently government thinks that wage inflation's going to be low. We've got a forecast of further increases coming down the road. What I want to do is, with all these difficulties in mind, ask Rob, and this might sound a really strange left field question, when do you expect the current power station to close?
I think there's a piece of work going on at the moment. This relates into the climate change. We know that conversation is going to have to start soon, but there isn't a firm date. I know this conversation starting about, because we can extend the life of the Pulrose power station. And I think it's also very, very interesting to note that when we actually brought in natural gas to generate our electricity, it's worth noting at the time when we made that selection, and you may have been around more than me, Chris, that was one of the cleanest options that we had at the time. So we should never forget that point. Yeah. And as you say, this really is, I've gone in as chairman as one of, if not the most difficult time since the financial crisis that obviously we all know about.
Well, thanks for that, Robert. And I'm glad you said that it is possible to extend the life, because if you go back to the budget debate, various people were saying various things. David Ashford, as Treasury Minister, said he started indicating in his words that the life of the gas power station might be, as it were, somewhat limited. And I think I certainly, in my mind, challenge that, and you've indicated to me that it is possible to extend it.
But it's the same for the energy from waste plant. That's also, potentially can be extended beyond 2029.
But then the Chief Minister himself, then talking about the massive transition issue we face over climate change, indicated that government couldn't do it on its own. So the problem I've got in my mind is how the general public, individual households facing all these current cost escalations, can contribute significantly in coming years to paying their part of the transition, insulating houses, going over to air source heat pumps, etc. The cost there is absolutely astronomical. McKinsey, on January the 25th, produced a major piece of work, and they said that transition costs, and these are extraordinary numbers, transition costs should be seen on average as being around about 7% of GDP every year from 2023 on to 2050. Now our GDP is 5 billion, so we're talking about 350 million pound a year. And one or two people celebrate that we've actually considered allocating 25 million. I mean, how much alone would it cost just to, for example, convert the hospital? What I'm desperately trying to say here is we all need to come down to earth and realise what a massive challenge.
Can I come in? I think you're absolutely right. It is a challenge, but I think here today, I think the first thing we've got to do is get through this energy crisis, and this is a crisis for the island. We talk about housing crisis, and I just want to go back to that. As I say, the low figure is 5%, which is a given because that's a Tynwald direction. The other one, as I say, the high figure is 39%. But to put it all into context, Manx Gas only buy 10 million therms. We buy 40 million. They've already increased their prices by 27.5%. They have half the number of customers for us than us, but they have increased their cost already. And based on the interviews that they gave the other day, there is a chance they may be looking for a further increase in April. So if we end up setting our tariffs even at 10%, 12%, or even 20%, it shows how incredibly hard the MUA have worked in the last 12 months to actually protect its customers, both from a business point of view and a domestic. And I think it's very important that I put that out there.
I understand. But first of all, Manx Gas is a private company.
Agreed.
So they swim or they sink by making a profit.
But we still have to balance the books, and that is one of the hardest things that we're struggling at the moment.
But you balancing your books, you just get money off him, right?
Doesn't always
it's
work.
not as easy as that?
It isn't as easy as that.
Okay.
I mean,
Not now.
No, that's the same. Government is in a difficult position itself. As you say, it's only a cake, and it's got to be split up accordingly. I don't think anyone planned coming out of COVID after spending hundreds of millions of pounds protecting businesses, protecting jobs, to suddenly then to be facing a further crisis, which is an energy crisis. And there's very little people talking about, other than the fact that people are seeing their bills increases. The central government hasn't talked about it. I've spoke about it quite a lot, and I'm trying to be open, honest and transparent to people, and I will continue to do that.
When Alf was Treasury, he fixed the price of electricity for businesses because he wanted to give a long-term indication of how business would work, and it was very important. Now, if the prices have gone up in the meantime, they have to come to you for the
we are having the conversations. As you say, we are looking at a suite of options. We're not talking about profit here. We're talking about actually making sure that we can minimise the impact on our customers, but also meet the demands that we need to every day to keep that business running.
Okay, Andrew, what do you think of this?
Yeah, no, I'd say I agree. Obviously, Rob, we have had these long discussions with Manx U. We did raise, obviously, the debt for them to help to finance it. And in fairness, that as Rob's mentioned, they're probably going to have to utilise some of that to subsidise, because we are talking a horrendous rises here. And as Rob rightly says, we don't know. We haven't actually got the final figures yet. But I would suggest that it's going to be in the teens. I don't know. I say Rob's alluded to it, but I would suggest it may be in the teens.
30, 40?
Well, no,
maybe. You put the number out there.
Please,
just as a warning sign.
Yeah, no, please do not.
Don't edit this.
Chris' question was...
That's the worst.
Let's clarify this. Let's not put hairs running here. Right. Chris's was, he said, we know what the bottom figure is. What businesses are going to be setting their tariffs? What do they expect? I said, well, I can be honest with you. The low figure is 5%. The high...
Being honest is 40 or maybe 50%. Surely. That's honest.
No, it's not.
Because things are going up by 50%.
Paul, what I'm actually said is that's the high figure. We are desperately trying to bring it down as low as we can, taking in all of the things that we've got to deal with to make sure that business is viable day on day.
No,
that's what I make sure. So please don't...
We are trying to
mitigate. Yeah, please do not set the hair running that the electricity price is going to buy 39%.
Just have a conversation, and I hear those numbers, and it could be potential. It's not impossible.
We
don't know where we're going, do we?
I answered an honest question, as I always have on your programmes.
Yes.
Chris asked me an honest question, I gave it. That does not mean we're going to set tariffs at 39%.
You made it clear.
We're mitigating.
We've had two discussions this morning. One about forecasting forward on the budget, and the second one is the whole issue of energy as it locks into transition for climate change. I think what we've captured in the two pieces, Paul, is the degree of challenge that the Isle of Man government now faces. And for years, I've been asking government to address the issue of productivity, to be a smart or smaller organisation. My view is, unless once and for all government grasps that nettle and says that's exactly what we've got to be, we're not going to meet these challenges that are very, very significant indeed. So I hope that starts to happen.
Is there a need for Manx Gas?
No. I believe, looking at, since I've been here, right, I believe in my first major issue in Tynwald after election was having to vote for 27.5% for Manx Gas. I was very uncomfortable with that, as you can appreciate. I asked for accounts. I asked for forecasts from both Manx Gas and from the regulator.
Again?
No.
No?
No. They all said the usual thing, GDPR, corporate sensitivity, this, that, one thing or another. And I'm telling it as it is. I'm not holding any punches here. I went to Jersey on a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association visit, and I said to the chief executive, because I know that the good lady moves between islands, I said, I'm down in Jersey, I'd like a meeting. Agreed to have a meeting, but over the screen. Myself and Clark Timwold had that meeting over the screen. I asked all these questions again, and nothing was forthcoming, and all I received really was the usual platitudes. In fairness, I didn't manage to get to the last presentation that they made, was it a couple of months ago, Rob? I think.
Yeah.
Manx Gas. But what I hear from members that did attend, nothing's changed from the meeting I had in November. So we were now in January, 2 months.
This is extraordinary stuff you're saying.
Another 2 months
This
down
is
the
incredible.
road. Another 2 months down. Well, I'm telling you.
I know, no, but I mean, thank you.
You've asked me a question,
And I appreciate
so why
it.
am I not going to answer it? This is my personal experience. So
Well,
I
so
say
you-
to myself,
Yeah.
we've now got further meetings coming up with the regulator. So I say fine, but I say, well, if we're in this situation as a government that we can't have a meaningful, ongoing, honest dialogue with the major energy provider for our island, then where are we going? What's happening?
So you'd see the government take it over?
Well, no, I'm
No?
not suggesting that.
Oh, no?
But what I'm saying is that, can we do any worse? The thing is that never say, and I'm quite sure that Chris will recognise this from Steam Packet days and one thing, you know, don't take over. And we haven't taken over. We're not running the Steam Packet as a business. It's just we're the major. We've salvaged it as major shareholder. Now, whether we do something with that, I don't know. Now, this is a big. It may be that I've made revelations here that you only known to me, because obviously it's been my experience. What the best way forward, I don't know. I'd love to say, yeah, they've got all the expertise and one thing or another, but who owns the main line? Who owns the gas pipe?
Well, most of it is the government owns. I mean, most of the infrastructure, isn't it? I mean, am I being simplistic on this?
Yeah,
The main trunk.
Government
And I
owns
think
most
it's
of
just,
the
is it just the
infrastructure.
meters? Is it
It's just the
gas-
last few meters
last
into
few
people's
meters and
properties.
the
Same
meters to the
same
house?
question to you then. Is there a need for Manx Gas, or do you think there's other options?
I'm going to hold my powder on that one. I'll tell you the reason. I'll tell you the reason why. One is they are a customer of the Manx Utilities. I've also I've got very strong opinions on this as an MHK, and I think I'm going to hold them. But I will actually say that they are going through the same energy crisis as Manx Utilities. I think Manx Utilities have done a fantastic job to limit increases over the last year. But in respect of the future of Manx Gas, I'm going to hold that back because they are a customer.
Rob, it's a process that. I mean, tell me if I've got this right. I mean, did Manx Gas buy the gas from you,
We basically,
and then they pay you for that Manx Gas?
What happens is they ring us up, they tell us what gas they're looking for, we give them a spot price, we then provide the gas, we raise an invoice and they pay, but we make no money from it. So there's no uplift on it. It is straight through, and this is an economy of scale. So from an island's point of view, we buy 50 million therms. We buy it on their terms, what they ask for. We just pass it through, raise invoices, and they pay those invoices.
Okay, so we've identified today the massive energy cost issue that we face. It's a real challenge. You wouldn't be surprised if I then said that all these issues would go away, cost to the individual, cost to businesses, revenue into the Isle of Man government for transition would all go away if the Isle of Man could drill for its own gas. And the truth of the matter is this, that Crogger Limited have had zero cooperation from the DOI. And Andrew earlier on said that, in his book, there were going to be no more big fails on the issue of big strategic projects. Well, in my book, from what I understand, we're going that way now because the DOI have got their heads in the sand. They are not competent to deal with the issue, and a massive opportunity is now beginning to pass us by.
And you always have to declare your interest.
Well,
at
I've
this
done
point.
that 3 or 4
No, you have to
times.
every time because people don't watch them.
Okay, well,
Just
that's fine.
explain what your interest is.
Well, I'm a shareholder of Crogger.
Fine.
Yeah.
I think we should look at all the the ifs, the buts, the maybes around that particular field. However, this will not resolve the current energy crisis we're in, Chris. And this is, that may be a long term. And I know when we look at the green issues and everything else of trying to get more renewable energy supplies on the island, and maybe looking at a second AC connector coming into the island, these are all questions, but it will not address the current energy and inflationary pressures this island is facing, same as the UK and every single household at the moment.
Wow.
But you mentioned it, Rob, in that Manx Gas are facing exactly the same problems and know about it. And my worry is that they know about that, they know about the island's total reliance upon gas. Why have they never, when we're asking, why will they not, come and be more...
And they can still make this 8% increase per year, can't they? Whatever happens, they're allowed to make... Is it still 10% they bring it down?
Just please, talk to us. Talk to us, because we need to know. It's exactly the same situation as I mentioned with regarding departments. Don't have a major issue that you're keeping to yourself, hidden within your own books, and then suddenly come to us at the 11th hour and say, sorry, we've
but I've always said big strategic issues should not be left inside operating departments, and that's what's happening in terms of DOI and gas.
But I think with gas now, and for Rob to say, we're already involved in MU, Treasury, Council of Ministers. So this is now this is one thing which needed to be because of critical energy supplier.
As the chairman of Manx Utilities, I've never worked so hard, and I've never upset so many people trying to make a right decision as an MHK. I promise you that, and I apologise to officers and I apologise to people that I'm stepping over to try and get this increase on electricity to as low as I can without affecting the business.
Just one more time on this. Potentially, to keep the price down, you can talk to him and they can soften the blow by using money from some source. Is that potentially possible?
Let's be perfectly honest, okay? If we did borrow some from Treasury to get through to limit the impact on business and domestic customers, that has to be repaid back. So it's not just given to us. We have to pay it back. So what we're actually doing is we're softening the increase over a longer period. Now, if, for example, hypothetically, we set the figure at 10% or even 20%, and then we know that the break-even point is 39%, which is what I've said. Now, the rest of it has to be borrowed. The other 19% will have to either be borrowed or taken out of bond, which will create problems about the bond repayment.
But they wrote off the power station a few years ago, didn't they? They did hand a check.
To be perfectly honest, we've got to be very careful.
It did happen. They did write
but we've got to be very careful if government steps in to write things off.
They can, though.
Agreed. These are the suite of options, and these are the discussions that are going on. What we're trying to do is to make sure that cost impact is minimal as possible.
I think we've captured all the main points on this one.
Yeah.
It's obviously going to be of huge interest to your audience, but I think we should call it a day now on that one.
Finished? Anything else to add?
No, the only thing I would say that obviously if we do have to write, you talk about writing anything off, don't forget, we as Treasury, as Isle of Man government, we're only custodians of the taxpayers' money.
All I'm saying
if
is
we
it's
write it, if we write it off, it's their money that we're writing off. And if we make any more loans from Treasury that are out with a bond submission, which there would be, then it's got to be out of our reserves, which would then reduce the investment income. So it's again. We've got to be good custodians because it's not our money; it's the taxpayers' money.
Thank you very much. Have you got a date for when you're going to announce these things?
No, I mean,
sooner rather than later.
Realistically, the figure needs to be set before the end of February. But as you say, these discussions have been going since before Christmas. It has been that important just to put out there again how difficult this decision, because I understand as a publicly elected member, but also as the chair, I understand the pressure that households are struggling. That is why we've tried to delay any increase to get through the winter period. So because we know as the Manx Utilities that people have been using electricity as an alternative form of heating during the winter because of the 27.5% increase by Manx Gas.
Oh, so you've seen an extra uplift on usage, have you?
Well, I would. That's what we've. That's the information we've got back from customers. If you look on social media, a lot of people have said they've used electricity. So we've tried everything here. I honestly have never felt pressure like it.
Just explain. It was X amount, and it's how much now? Gas per therm. I mean, I know it's going up and down all the time.
When we secured 70% of our supply in 2021 at around 50 pence, we know the other 30 pence, the other 30%, cost us an additional £16 million. Normally, we would only spend 60. Normally, in a good year, and this has been over a 10-year period, on average, we're spending around £20 million producing, buying natural gas to produce electricity. We'd normally get a bit of income, drops it down to 16 million. So we normally spend 16 million pounds in 2021 going into 22. We don't know what the final figure is, but it's around 32 million pounds that we've spent to put everything into context.
And I think the big thing to recognise here is these are outside pressures that we have no control over.
Yeah. Wow. It's quite depressing, but also alarming.
Enlightening.
It's enlightening, but people are going to be worried.
I think it's absolutely right that we give the facts, and
you can't hide that, can you? I mean,
we can't, and I've always been open and honest and transparent, and I think it's absolutely right that I give all warts and all today.
Okay, and we'll see what that percentage is by the end of this month. You think?
Hopefully.
Okay. Hopefully. That's the end of this part. Thank you for watching.